do amazing things with you. Amen. Just say, I'm coming out. The next step to coming out of your wilderness is in verse 3. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests who are Levites carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow. Now this next step is a mental step. And I say it's a mental step because you have to be sure your mind is right when you leave the wilderness. You have to be sure that you don't become stuck, discouraged, or complacent while in the wilderness. If you become mentally stuck, you won't be able to shake off the bad experiences that happen in the wilderness. You won't understand that your wilderness is just for the meantime, and you're not supposed to be there forever. And if you allow yourself to be discouraged, then you won't care if you make it out of the wilderness or not. And you will begin to think that you will never make it out, and nor will you ever try to get out. And if you can become complacent with your wilderness, then you will be satisfied with just receiving manna from heaven, when all the while God has waiting for you a smorgasbord of all types of delicacies and exotic and extravagant foods. But once you get your mind right, you can begin to move. And now that your mind is clear, you can receive the instruction that God sends. The Lord will tell you when it's time to move. The Lord may send a word through a chosen vessel, or he may send you signs that will lead you out, or he may speak to you and just tell you it's time to come out. How about it, Abraham? Would you have been the father of many nations if you did not leave your homeland to go to a place that the Lord promised to show you? What about the first disciples of Jesus? Would they have been witnesses to Jesus' ministry, death, and resurrection if they had not moved when he called them all by name? We cannot afford to be stuck, discouraged, or complacent in the wilderness, because your destiny awaits you in the promised land. Amen. Now that you have consecrated yourself to God and he can trust you, you can hear his voice clearly and you're sensitive to his move. And now that you have got your mind right and you're no longer stuck, discouraged, or complacent in the wilderness, you have received the instructions and the Lord has told you it's time to come out. Now you are ready for the final step, and it's the big one. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm coming out, I'm coming out, I'm coming out. It's time to cross the Jordan. Some of you have been in your wilderness for 40 days, some for 40 weeks or 40 months. And yes, some of y'all are like the Israelites that have been wandering for 40 years. But I'm here to tell you it is time to come out. You can't die because the promised land is flowing with milk and honey. You can't die because God has purpose for your life. And you can't die because what God has for you is for you. You have to take authority and go in and possess the land and all that God has promised you. It is yours. Amen. Look at verse 24 of chapter 2. The spies told Joshua, the Lord has surely, somebody say surely. The Lord has surely given the whole land into your hands. So not only has he given you the land, but the people are afraid of you too. So what are we waiting for? Those of us who are still stuck in the wilderness. Are we ready to come out? We don't have to be afraid. If God is before you, who can be against you? One of the old hymns of the church said, the Lord is my rock and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? You really don't have any excuses for staying in the wilderness. Let me see if I can get us some help, amen, so that can help us get across the Jordan and into the promised land. Let's get some help from our Bible friends, amen. What about Ruth? After her husband died and she stay with her mother-in-law, and it was rough, amen. But it was when it was all said and done, the Lord gave her a husband, a rich husband, amen. And after that, she had another child who was in the lineage of Jesus, amen. What about Job? He lost everything, his children, his servants, his lifestyle. His wife kicked him to the curb, amen. His friends were calling him stupid. But he endured through the end all of the emotional and physical pain. And the Lord gave him double for his trouble, amen. And I know I like the Old Testament, but some of y'all might need some New Testament help. What about Jesus, who hung on the cross for 6 hours, amen? He was pierced in the side, amen, and bled and died for our transgressions. He lay in the grave for 3 days, and when he arose from the grave, now he is sitting on the right hand of God the Father Almighty, interceding on our behalf, amen? It's worth spending a little time in the wilderness to get to the promise. Let's say it again. It's worth spending a little time in the wilderness to get to the promise. But it doesn't end there. Once you come out of the wilderness, you got to tell somebody else how you made it through. If we jump over to chapter 4 of Joshua, he tells 12 men to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan. And these stones were to be a memorial to the children of Israel. So now that you're coming out of the wilderness experience and you're crossing the Jordan River, you have to remember to pick up some stones as you go by. The memorial, amen, but not to glorify in the wilderness, but to help you remember that while you were in the wilderness, God was there all along. He never did leave you nor forsake you, amen. And that's where so many of us get messed up, because we like to wallow in the bad things, and we forget to glory in God, knowing that He will always be there for us. We get mentally stuck and physically stuck and fall into depression and wanting to commit